All right. What I want to talk to you about today is Education for Sustainability, the National Strategy on Education for Sustainable Development, which is the Department of Education and Skills published in 2014, and it has a current lifespan up to 2020. It was actually published in 2014, but it was very much influenced at that time by our Sustainable Future, which was a framework for sustainable development in Ireland, which is an overarching governmental document. And in that document, the Department of Education were obliged to create their own strategy, but we report into the Department of the, I call them the Department of the Environment for short. Also at that time there was the UN Decade for Education for Sustainable Development, and I suppose a lot of the debate and discussion in that actually led to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which I will talk to afterwards. And around 2012-2013 we did an amount of consultation with the different key stakeholders, and we're very aware of what was going on at the UN, at the Council of Europe, at the EU to create the strategy. So in the actual strategy itself, we say that Education for Sustainable Development aims to ensure that education contributes to sustainable development by equipping learners with the relevant knowledge, the what, the key disposition and skills, the how, and the values, the why. And funny enough, I was over in the Council of Europe last week, and they were very much stressing the whole idea of the values. That we need to have the young people realising that values are extremely important. So we want to motivate and empower the learners, and we're talking about learners right through the system, from preschool, primary, post-primary, further ed, higher ed, formal, non-formal, informal. We all need to be complementing each other. There's no point in learning one thing in school and then having something contradicting it in the way you live at home. So that they will become informed, active citizens who take action in a more sustainable future. And that action could be challenging, say, politicians if there is something that they feel is not appropriate, or in their workplace or whatever. But you must, when you're challenging, have evidence-based, and to try to get that idea into the minds. There's no point in saying, I don't like that. You know, you have to have your evidence base. So that's the type of young person that we're trying to create through the education system. My background is I'm an environmental geologist, and I worked on landfill sites and groundwater development. And when I came into sustainable development, I thought it was all about the environment, full stop. And luckily I had some other staff in the office that said, no, Breda, it's not just about environmental area and climate change and biodiversity and water security, which is extremely important, but it's also about the complementarity between that and the socio-economic and the political sphere, because we have to get them all working together to ensure that we have a future, a quality of life for our young people into the future, because there's no point in having economic growth if we're going to end up having huge amounts of air pollution, etc., or if we are going to have the human rights destroyed of the workers, say, in third world countries who are working for next to nothing to provide us with our $2.99 t-shirts in wherever you're going to get it. But we also, and the Council of Europe are pushing this as well, that you need to have democracy and you need to have governance. And interestingly, the people there a lot of them were from Eastern Europe, and they couldn't use the word democracy, and we take that for granted. So that was interesting. We have 8 priority action areas in the strategy. Key ones there are leadership and coordination, the curriculum, and we made a conscious decision that we did not want sustainable development to be a module within the curriculum, that you do it and that's a box ticked. We wanted to try to ensure, and the NCCA will be talking to you later, and sorry, Barry Slattery can't be here from post-primary, so I'll refer to it a little bit, but we want to ensure that it appears quite regularly throughout the curriculum so that young people realise it's something that happens throughout their lives, and we wanted to go right through the learning experience. So the opportunities in the curriculum we would have, we're reviewing the primary at the moment, or that's just in the consultation process, but at junior cycle, the new framework came in 2015 and it's been phased in. We have a new wellbeing programme coming in, which will be the original CSP, SPHE. But we also have new specifications, but say, for example, they come in this year in science and in business. And in business, there's aspects of ethics, because it's extremely important that we get the young people to realise that being ethical is also being sustainable. We also, which is really exciting, we have a new leaving certificate that's been phased in with 41 schools involved at the moment, with over 1,000 children. And normally when you introduce a new subject, it's very slow to take up. but the 41 schools have almost 1,000 young people, and I met some of them at UNESCO, and they're just so excited. They're allowed to think, they're allowed to analyse, there's no textbooks, and keep them out of the system as long as you can, you know, because the kids then have to be creative and not get a rote learned answer, because that's definitely what you don't want. We also have sustainable development across the agricultural science and economics syllabus. But the Department of Education has not just to talk, but walk the walk as well. And when we're creating new schools, they try to make sure that they are sustainable. We are really excited that schools have the opportunity to take cross-curricular opportunities from UNESCO, from Antashka to get the Green School flag, etc., etc. We also, further ed, sometimes people tend to think it's sort of the Cinderella of education, but they have their own strategy on sustainable development. And then in higher ed, we want them to be talking more about it, not just doing it in the background, but actually talking about sustainable development. And I think to do that, we must recognise what's happening on the ground and acknowledge it. So what influencers are out there? I mean, it was really exciting that the UN Sustainable Development Goals were co-chaired when they were being developed by Ireland, by David Donoghue, our ambassador, and also by Kenya. And that gave us a very high profile in the whole thing. And to get, is it 190 countries or some huge numbers, well over 100 countries, to actually sign up to these Sustainable Development Goals, one of which is education. And I have a little gallery on my wall in work, so this looks at me every day, so I can't forget about it. So it's extremely important that we do realise that education is one of the areas that will inform us and enable people, all people, to influence the other 16 areas. The other thing, when we did consultation with young people only 2 years ago, we had huge issues with the use of the term sustainable development. They hadn't a blooming clue what we were talking about. And we were working with the Department of Children and Youth Affairs, and they were trying to break it down into simple language and, you know, what's the quality of your life. But now there's so much media talk about it that the young people, yeah, it's just a normal term that's used by them now. So that even in 2 years is mega. So we also have a whole of government approach, and the Department of Communications, Climate Action and Environment are now the department that are leading and involving all the rest of the departments and making us report to them and say what we're doing. We also have, and there's the UN, there's ourselves, there's the Council of Europe, and there's all different names to a lot of these different initiatives, but we're all talking about the same thing. We want a better environment for our young people. We also have the area of development education, which very much looks perhaps at third world, but we need to understand it here locally and nationally, and then complement that with the international environment. So they're not contradicting each other. It's very much collaboration, cooperation, and complementarity there. In 2015, we did a life skills survey, and one of the areas new to the 2015 survey was that we asked questions about sustainable development. Remember, the strategy was only in a year, so it had only just been introduced. And it was the principals who responded to this questionnaire, and they said that 89% of the schools support their pupils to have a knowledge and skills to be aware of sustainable development. 71% reported that their teachers were adequately prepared. And this is where I thought it was interesting. And I suppose it was the plastic bag effect, it was the smoking effect, but all the rest. In the schools, the young people and the schools are monitoring the energy efficiency, 85% of them, and 90% of them are seeking to reduce water. It's a little water usage, or waste usage, I should say, but it's a little disconcerting that only 21% of the primary schools have a student council to allow the young people to have their say formally. But that's up from 8%. And I have to admit that I had to consult with young people about 5 years ago, 8 to 10-year-olds, and I was going, for God's sake. Because I'd been talking to the teenagers in the afternoon, and I thought, what are they going to tell me? They absolutely wowed me, and I am absolutely 100% behind, young people. They may not use our terms, but they have the same ideas as us. Whereas you can see there, and I won't read it for post-primary, but you can see the percentages are a bit less in post-primary. It's easier in primary because you've got the one teacher teaching the one class, whereas when you go into post-primary, it's more subject-based, and that can make a difficulty. But in post-primary, you have 99% have student councils. However, when I was at an eco-UNESCO thing, and if I have principals here, some of the young people were saying that they feel that in their school the student council is ticking a box because the principal won't respond to the requests that the young people have. And really, you have to respond to them and say, yes, we'll take that on board, or no, we can't take that on board because of X, Y, and Z. But to have a student council and not listen to what they say is very negative. So what are the next steps for us? Well, we're going to have a forum on the 15th of November up in Farmleigh, where we will be actually doing a midterm review of the strategy, and we hope to have that completed by 2018. And Kevin, my colleague here, will be working on that with us. We want to prioritise out of the review to keep this prioritisation of the implementation of ESD, and we also will be having the NCCA publish their review of where ESD is in the curriculum. So they're all coming together at the one time, and their review will be very much a significant part of our review. The other thing, a few weeks ago, I was over the other side of the square at the IIEA conference, where we had Caroline Pettit from UNRIC talking to us, and she is at the Europe end of the UN, and she said the one thing they're bothered about is that they don't seem to be communicating the Sustainable Development Goals well enough. So next year, 2018, is the year where they're going to actually focus on getting the message, getting the urgency that Duncan is talking about across. And Ireland has volunteered to report to the UN next July, so that'll make sure that we all have everything in hand. Could I just say that myself, I've been very lucky to be in the Antarctic in 2005, January 2005, and I have 2 photographs on my kitchen wall. One of when Shackleton was there in 1911-12 of South Georgia, and you're looking at Grytviken, and you have this most wonderful mountain behind it covered in snow. I have the same photograph in 2005. There's a teensy bit of snow on top. It's the same time of the year. I have 2 minutes. I'm on the second last slide. So that's really that's one of my scary things, and also coming out this morning, my daffodils, they're that high. It's only November. Things are changing from when I was a youngster. So finally, my final slide is, what is the ESD really about? And the UN section 4.2 says that by 2030, we want to ensure that all the learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through ESD and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and non-violence. Aidan in the back row there and I were up in Derry a few weeks ago. I don't know if any of the rest of you were, where we heard the Dalai Lama speak. And he's in his 80s, and he said, the one thing I wish I would have in my life, which hasn't happened so far, is that we would have peace, and that people would be ethical and live appropriately with each other rather than be against each other. It was quite striking, and he said that that's more important than learning about religion. And I thought that was mega from a head of a religious grouping. So he really wants a promotion of a culture of peace and non-violence, that we have global citizenship and appreciation of cultural diversity and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. Can I say the strategy is up on the website? If you read it and you have any comments on it, we would love to have them by the middle of December, because comments that you have would really be appreciated. Kevin, I have to leave because I have to go back to a meeting after this session is over. About Irish in the curriculum. That's the life of somebody in the department. It's sustainable development for 1 minute and then it's Irish for the next minute. But Kevin is staying here and he's been your reflective listener, so he's going to have to listen hard all day, and he will, what you say today will also influence what we're doing, because their theme today is about education and sustainable development. So I think I've covered myself within my time, have I?
Yes,
okay.
very well.
Thank you.
Thank you.